Canadians in several federal ridings are going to the polls this summer. Prime Minister Mark Carney has called 3 by-elections for August 31st. We got one in BC, one in Ontario, one in Quebec. Time now for a special holiday edition of the Power Panel. Melanie Richer is a former communications director for the NDP. Greg McEachern is a former Liberal ministerial advisor. Fred Delory is a former Conservative campaign manager. And Robert Fife is the former Ottawa bureau chief for the Globe and Mail. It's great to see you all. Thanks for doing this today. Fred, if I can start with you, the Chicoutimi-Fjord riding, I think, is the most interesting of the three. Held by Conservative now, certainly probably the most competitive of the bunch. What's at stake? How consequential is this for the Conservative Party, that particular riding?
Well, it certainly doesn't help if we were to lose this seat, given where the poll numbers are and all the angst this summer and basically a civil war happening on Twitter. Right. So if we were to lose this, it certainly doesn't help the leader in any way. It is going to be a very, very tough seat to hold for the Conservative Party. This was a Richard Martel seat in many ways. Now, we've been competitive in this riding for a long time before he won it too, so it's not a total wipeout for us. We hopefully will be competitive, and obviously, hopefully, we win it. But this will likely be, I think, a fight between the Liberals and the Bloc to see who wins this. The other two seats are super safe Liberal seats. So all the resources for the federal parties, both the Conservative and the Liberals, all of their budgets will be going into this riding. That's where the battle will be this summer.
Mel, my initial thought when I saw the news that these particular ridings were up was that, oh, there you got a BC riding. Avi Lewis is going to run in that. He decided not to. What do you think he's waiting for?
That's a great question, Peter. I'm not sure. I understand, I'm of two minds as it relates to when it makes sense for Avi to run versus when it makes sense for him to sit out. You obviously don't want your leader to run in a seat that he cannot win, because then you're not really setting him up in any way to succeed. So I understand the instinct to hold back until you have a riding that he can run in, that people know him in, and that he can win. Some folks suggested that, a good Toronto riding like Beach's East York could be one where he could do well in. The flip side of that is obviously when the leader doesn't live in the riding, it's a lot harder to commute to, see family, whatnot. That makes things a little bit complicated. And we had a little bit of that with Jagmeet, with his riding being in Burnaby and his parents being in Brampton. So I appreciate that. The other side of it, though, is the farther away you are from the House of Commons, the longer away you are from joining the House of Commons, the not less relevant, but the harder it is for your message to punch through. If you're able to respond to stuff, be in Ottawa, and be part of the news just automatically because you're here and you're responding and you're just following the issues a lot better, people pay more attention to you. So in this time where we're trying to rebuild the party and we're trying to figure out how we can persuade Canadians to care about us and to care about what the things that New Democrats are saying, I do think it's important to quicker rather than not find a seat in the House of Commons. If it's not one of these 3 by-elections, we know the Prime Minister has to call by-elections before the end of the year for the other open seats. Maybe it makes sense for him to pick one of those instead.
Yeah, Greg, we got 4, I think, still to come. My electoral math is I think the Liberals could afford to lose all 3 of these by-elections and still hold their majority. And yet, we've seen some pretty high-profile Liberals out there already campaigning in that North Vancouver riding Mel was talking about. How do the Liberals balance out? It's in the middle of August. Nobody's going to be paying attention. The stakes aren't enormously high, and yet it would be nice to have everything shored up heading into the fall.
It's about having a strong ground game, which they obviously have in North Vancouver. Even when the tide was kind of going out for Justin Trudeau minorities in 19 and 21, Jonathan Wilkinson still did extremely well there. And it's kind of a funny riding because parts of it through the 90s go back to like Reform and Alliance. But it's been very much a Liberal riding since. And there is, I have a friend who, had worked on the campaign there in 2015. They do have a strong, ground game. To Mel's point about Avi Lewis, missing out on that. I mean, look, in Nova Scotia, there was an NDP leader who did not have a seat, and she, was from Cape Breton, quite a long drive from the provincial capital. And that leader camped out at the legislature. I had the nickname of Our Lady of the Library. And again, the Nova Scotia legislature doesn't sit the amount of time that the House of Commons does, but while it was there, that leader was there every day trying to get into scrums, trying to get in the story. And Mel makes a good point is, if you're not going to run, you should be at least visible.
Bob, there's a funny balance here. They picked three that look, probably all three of them certainly look to be winnable for the Liberals. They've got those four yet to come. It's in August when nobody's going to really care. Like, how do you think they did the math of which ridings to do now, which ones to hold off on? I know people haven't actually left their seats yet, but they could have waited a little bit. Like, what do you make of the split on the timing of?
Well, I think that's to maintain their majority.
Right.
It seemed to work out from a mathematical point of view and a practical point of view from the Liberal standpoint. Look, the thing that surprises me the most in this by-election and other by-elections is that I keep waiting for the Prime Minister to announce a big-name, high-quality cabinet minister or MP to come in as a cabinet minister, right. Somebody of the stature of Tim Hodgson, for example, who is, I think, has done a very, very good job. And he's
liked by businesses, came from the energy sector.
And he's carrying a heavy load.
Yes.
And you keep looking for the Prime Minister to bring in somebody of that kind of quality, and he still has not done that. For example, Beaches is just it's a former riding executive or a constituency aide to Erskine Smith.
It's not exactly the most high-profile candidate.
Braden Kelly, who is running in North Vancouver, was the deputy chief of staff. His whole life has been politics. Yeah. He's not held a very big role in the business community. So I keep waiting for that sort of person to come, particularly if, as we expect, there may be a cabinet shuffle before the House of Commons returns. In terms of Avi Lewis, I had lunch with Avi Lewis a month and a half ago or whatnot, and he's very determined not to lose again. He's run twice and has lost, and he wants to make sure that if he gets a seat, he's going to actually win. And I think he understands, and disagree with my friends here, but you don't have to be in Parliament all the time. It doesn't have the same focus as it did 10 years ago. It just doesn't. I mean, everybody's looking at social media. Nobody's paying attention to the scrums like they used to, or question period. So for a new leader, I think it's much more effective for him to spend his time crisscrossing the country, getting to know the party, getting to know people in the local community and local media. I think that's going to be far more effective to him than just hanging around Parliament Hill to ask somebody comes up to him in a scrum.
No, I'm not saying that they have to be in Parliament. I do find it kind of amusing because of the amount of coverage, Prime Minister's attendance for question period recently got. So which is it? Do you need to be there or not? It's not that you have to be in Parliament.
But it's an easier ticket to be visible.
To get in the news, and I watch way too much. I'm a subscriber of the Globe and Mail. I don't see a lot of Avi Lewis. I have to prep, during the school year for Mr. Cochrane, and I read a lot and watch a lot, and I don't see Avi Lewis. And I would totally agree with Bob. Parliament doesn't matter if you're being visible, but I don't see him being very visible.
Mel, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I was just going to say the same thing. I think that's the hick. It's the, and maybe I'm a little biased as a former NDP decoms, but I feel like New Democrats are always having to chase media a little bit more. And the fact that you're not there, you're not able to respond quickly. And I've just heard, from journalist friends who are like, this is the perfect issue. You talk about climate change and Mark Carney not doing the same thing as Trudeau and losing some of the cred on that. And Avi Lewis being the perfect person to take on that baton. But the delay in getting into the news is almost like too late to respond. And I don't know if that's because you're not, in the House able to respond quickly. And just like the other thing, we need money. And in order to travel the country, that is expensive to go meet with members in every corner. And the party doesn't have that right now. So another positive of being a member of Parliament and having that leader's budget if you're in the House is you're able to do that parliamentary work across the country. So those are kind of the things that you need to weigh. Agree with Bob completely. You should not be running if there is not a path to winning, and that may not be possible right now, but finding ways to I don't want to use the word relevant because I think he's relevant. New Democrats are always relevant. But finding a way to get in front of people in a way that is digestible for people, I think, is the challenge right now, and maybe the opportunity for him in the fall.
Fred, it's funny that it's like the opposite problem for Pierre Poilievre. Avi Lewis is having a hard time getting in the media. Pierre's in it for all the wrong reasons. Yeah. Is the by-election, especially the Chicoutimi one, is this an opportunity to sort of restamp or potentially, put his leadership at further risk?
If Conservatives can hold the seat, it certainly sends a message that we're not going backwards, that we're not losing ground. But if we lose it, it may send that message.
But is there winning and losing? Like if they lose the seat but are really competitive and do a good job with a not as well-known candidate in a riding where they're not traditionally, like you say, it's a Richard Martel riding, it's not a Conservative riding. Is there a threshold that they can say, well, that we did well? Or is a loss?
That's been the message for the last year. Look how great we did losing last year. Wasn't that amazing?
Yeah.
We lost the election last year, and we still celebrate that for some reason. I don't think we can do that for this by-election. It is, look, the Saguenay region, we traditionally do have a seat there. The Conservative Party, since the new party was created in the early 2000s, we've always been competitive in that region and have almost always held a seat in that region. So losing this will be, no question, bad for the party, and it will be bad for Poilievre. It'll be something he'll have to communicate somehow, and why did we lose this? People need to be asking those questions.
Bob, walk me through the timing. You've got these elections, you've got the Quebec election, you've got the Alberta referendum, and they're going to have to jam, the Liberals will have to jam some kind of a cabinet shuffle, presumably, before fall session starts. How interlaced are those individual events?
Well, I think he's made his mind up that I presume August 31st is these three by-elections. So sometime
between that
and there will be a cabinet shuffle. I'm pretty sure of that. So the House comes back, what, the 18th or something like that?
I think so. Yeah.
So he's got a bit of time, but I would even think that he may even want to do a cabinet shuffle before October 30, the by-elections, because you do have to have your members of parliament or your cabinet ministers get prepped and briefed, because when the House comes back, you're going to be getting a lot of questions in question period. You're also going to be you're going to have reporters on your back asking you questions. So it makes much more sense for if there's going to be a cabinet shuffle, and I think there probably will be, that you do it in August so that they have enough time to be able to get briefed and be able to go to the House of Commons and face reporters.
Greg, we only got about a minute before break, but does that sort of, if you look at that, that's a pretty busy calendar right to the end of into November. Does that mean these other by-elections punt into the new year probably?
Potentially. I mean, it's really interesting. I mean, Braden Cayley was named as a candidate the same day that there was a competed nomination. So it's not necessarily, in my world, political business as usual. Presumably, there will be a cabinet retreat. I know that the caucus retreat for the Liberals is very late. It's just before the House comes back. If you are going to have an effective cabinet retreat, you're going to need to shuffle. So you've got about the most you could probably push that is about 14 days before that retreat. I mean, Canada's a big country. Logistically, it's hard to get people there. The other aspect of the shuffle is that there are people in caucus who are very unhappy with some of the performance, and rightly so, of some of the cabinet ministers.
All right. We're going to leave it there, and the Power Panel will be back shortly. It is crunch time for Canada's trade deal with the U.S. and Mexico. And with the clock ticking before tariffs are set to spike, U.S. President Donald Trump is threatening 50% tariffs on billions of dollars worth of Canadian exports, even on goods that are CUSMA compliant. The Prime Minister says it's time to intensify talks while Trump continues to double down on his dislike of the deal.
Well, I'm not looking to renew it. We don't need anything that Canada has. We don't need anything that Mexico has, but they need everything that we have.
I would rather not have the USMCA. I liked it because it got us out of NAFTA. I would rather leave it unsigned. I'd rather have it terminated.
Canada's been very, very tough on us over the years. I mean, in all fairness to them, they need us to survive. Without us, there's no way they can survive. And they have to treat us better.
You got to stop these fires from coming in and, poisoning our air. Maybe they should pay us some damages or something, or we should do some tariffs.
So the USMCA, are you looking to update that?
I don't care. I mean, I don't really want to. I'd rather be independent. Here's the thing. Mexico and Canada need us. We don't need them. The deal is important for them. It's not important for us.
All right, let's bring back the power panel with Melanie Richer, Greg McEachern, Fred Delory, and Robert Fife. Fred, you listen to the president, and he says, we don't need this deal. His own officials have said the exact opposite, said, look, it's trillions of dollars in trade. You need some kind of a deal. They just want to see changes on the margins. How should we, as the people watching this, as the people upset about this, as the people concerned about this, how much should we read into the kind of rhetoric we hear from Donald Trump versus the kind of specifics we hear from like a Jameson Greer?
Yeah, well, he wrote a book on this. This is just a tactic, I would say, from the president and how he negotiates. It's how he's doing it in terms of saying he doesn't need us, trying to put as much advantage as that he can get when it comes to this. But, you know, we do have actual professionals sitting down and mapping this out, and hopefully they get some kind of deal. But at the end of the day, this is going to be Trump and Carney sitting down and finalizing something. All the officials can do all their stuff, and we don't know when they sit down, when they do that, what kind of mood is the president in? Has not been a rational actor throughout all of this, so who knows how this is going to actually play out.
And Mel, like Jameson Greer, the U.S. Trade Representative, said on the July 1st deadline, whatever you want to call it, to renew CUSMA, he was saying, look, we know what the broad parameters, the issues we need to work our way through, but we can't really do it until, not just to finalize, but almost to get started in this intensified stage. You need to have an agreement between Carney and Trump about what they're actually talking about. Mm-hmm. So, like, when they say we're going to intensify talks, what do they mean?
That's a really great question. And again, like, we're dealing with someone who is not necessarily dealing in good faith. I shouldn't say necessarily. He's not dealing in good faith, and he's not being, reasonable or rational on a day-to-day basis. And anytime almost that he's having a bad day, he consistently throws kind of talks with Canada under the bus. So it's really hard to read what is real and what is show for how he's talking to Americans at home. Obviously, our government, despite this, has to be able to find a common ground or a path forward. And I think to be fair to the Prime Minister and to their team, I think they've been doing a good job at managing what they say in response to the president. He says something like this almost every few days, and it's really hard not to react or to reassure that we're on it. I think the thing that is positive for the Prime Minister currently is it's summer. People are out enjoying their time. Their kids are at home. They're paying attention to different things. And I also think there's a bit of we've lost the ability to hear everything the president is saying because it just seems so volatile on a day-to-day basis. So it's really hard to take everything that he says seriously and to take it at front value. The problem is if he moves ahead on something like this, their jobs will be even more so than they are already impacted. The cost of everything will be impacted. So if that's a real threat and it moves ahead, it then becomes a different territory for the government. They're no longer just talking about this thing. There's going to have to be some real reassurance to people who are facing that and what they're doing to help them. So, but all that to be said, I do think they're in a bit of not a sweet spot, but in a space right now where it gives them the ability to stay a little bit quiet publicly, to not upset the president a little bit more. But I think you're right, or Fred's right also. The president to prime minister relationship and conversations is so important. Again, though, with the caveat that you're dealing with someone who's volatile, someone who changes his mind all the time, and that when he has a bad day, takes a shot at us because that's helpful as it relates to how he talks to the American people. So there's varying degrees there of how much attention you need to be paying to it, how much truth is there, but obviously still a lot of worried with regular folks on how this is going to impact them and their day-to-day lives. So I do think we're getting to the point of you need to start showing us something if the Prime Minister wants his polling to stay the way it is.
I've been going through the list of the stuff that's going to be hit or potentially going to be hit by this 50% tariff. It's the weirdest thing I've ever seen. Like there's the first rounds of this actually had some real targeted resonance. It made sense. It was strategic. Now it's like hockey sticks that aren't actually made here. But there's stuff that really does matter. Cement, for example. You want to build all the factories you want to build, you're going to need some cement. Is there a risk, Greg, in I think the assumption is that we'll be able to talk him down off this ledge and get it punted out, that he'll delay it the way he delays a lot of these things. That seems like a risky approach at this stage.
Yeah, I'm not sure I would trust that approach. And Mel mentioned about people tuning Donald Trump out. Susan Delacourt recently wrote about this in the Star, and we don't know what the impact will be. I know a lot of people are waiting for the midterms and think that they're going to hurt him. Well, first we're going to have to depend on the Democratic Party, and there's been some recent stories about lack of fundraising, debt, things like that. I've never ever been convinced that the Democratic Party would not find a way to mess this up. But hope springs eternal. But I would go beyond like the hockey sticks thing. Was that they thought they were maybe hitting our pride. But if you go and look at the local radio stations in Tennessee and Kentucky on alcohol, or you look at tourism coverage in Las Vegas or Old Orchard Beach, that is still hurting people in the United States. There's still lots of coverage of that at the state and local level about the job losses. That has an impact on the races that we're going to see, Super Tuesday in the fall. That's going to be a big issue. But I don't think it will necessarily matter to the president, because all the president cares about, and I don't think he really wrote the book, Fred, but that whole approach is, how do I, Donald Trump, personally get a win out of this? And that's why he's still stuck in Iran, because he can't get away. He says all these things. They're calling me at night and they're offering me gifts. No one believes that anymore. He's an unreliable narrator.
So all of this said, Bob, Dominic LeBlanc is back down in Washington, was back there last week, after Mark Carney had said that he and the president had agreed to intensify talks. I was trying to figure out who he was talking to, and I didn't really get anywhere. What do you know about who the Canadians were talking to?
Well, they're talking to Jamieson Greer.
Are they, though?
Yeah. And Jamieson Greer is the point man on this.
Yes.
And they more or less have managed to keep Howard Lutnick on the sideline.
Because he was in charge for a while. Then it was Bessent, and now it's Greer.
It's Greer, and that's from the Canadian perspective, they'd rather deal with Jamieson Greer.
For sure.
Look, I understand that broadly outlines are, we double energy, we provide them with uranium, there's got to be some kind of deal on the Golden Dome and F-35s. Yep. These are kind of the broad things that I think are being discussed. But if nothing gets resolved, and because at the end of the day, it comes down to Donald Trump.
Right.
There is a growing call from very respected people in this country that Canada will have to retaliate. In the New York Times last week, Krista Freeland did a really good article on the necessity to be prepared to retaliate against the Americans. Scotty Greenwald, who was the former head of the Canada-American Business Council, wrote an article saying, I love America, but from Canada's perspective, you've got to be prepared to now hit back at the Americans. Doug Ford has been saying this for quite some time. You're seeing that from David Eby in British Columbia. So you're starting to see a consensus of putting pressure on Carney, if nothing gets resolved by that deadline, that it may be that Canada is going to start, or at least they're trying to give the Prime Minister the backbone to be able to retaliate. And I think that's probably something that's going to be seriously on the table.
Mel, you're nodding along, and I've thought a lot in this I've spent a lot of the first half of July down in D.C. meeting with a lot of these people to try to get a sense of this. I thought a lot about what leverage Canada has, and we have all kinds of leverage. And it doesn't just mean Canada needs to impose retaliatory tariffs. As Greg says, a lot of the stuff that's hurting are like the booze bans, the Canadians of their own volition not going to the United States and spending money on American tourism. What are the other points of leverage? Like, does it have to all be just a retaliatory tariff, or are there things that we as consumers can do that can also hurt? Like, we buy a lot of consumer goods. We buy a lot of stuff from the Americans.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you saw that, right, last year, maybe not at this time, but at the beginning of last year when this started happening, the pride that Canadians had in Canada and what is available here, you saw the impacts of that, right? I remember I spent a full day driving around Ottawa looking for Canadian paint, because it was like, there's no way in heck that I was buying American paint, right? I was going to spend the extra 2 hours to go find that paint. And so many people in my universe were doing the same thing. I talk about being from a border town and being in the States every few weeks, and it's September, or it's July 2026, and I haven't been since the president has been, since his inauguration, because that is what I can do to either support tourism here in Canada and to say I'm not okay with how the U.S. is treating Canada and how Canadians are being treated. So totally agree with the retaliation, agree with like how do we change our attitudes and our behaviors at a time where Canadians are willing to do that. They're looking to do that is super important. I do also agree though with what Bob was saying, that I think the feeling of the elbows up that the Prime Minister talked about in the last election campaign so adequately it captured how people in Canada were feeling about, being stabbed in the forehead by their best friend, and what they were willing to do to stand up for their neighbors, to buy local. That whole movement of purchasing local, purchasing Canadian, and spending more energy and time to do that was something that I think had a lasting impact. And I think there's definitely a lot of folks who are willing to do that again. So what does that look like? I think it looks like the Prime Minister not calling for folks to do that, but giving people a reason to continue to do that. And that is a perfect way to show that we're going to be, investing here, supporting our neighbors instead of supporting a president that keeps taking shots at us.
And yet, Fred, quick last word to you. All of this is predicated on getting some kind of a deal with a guy who notoriously doesn't hold up his own deals. He breaks them all the time.
Like Kuzma.
Like the Iran deal, like the MOUs, like so many, the UK deal. They keep saying, yeah, we signed a deal and now we're demanding more. How do you square that? What do you do?
You wait 2 years until the next presidential election.
900 some days left.
Yeah, I don't
that's
know
a lot of time to wait.
It is, but maybe that's a strategy, waiting in some way and trying to delay things and push things out and try to limit the damage as much as possible until then. Because you're right, whatever deal is signed, we don't know what's going to happen the very next day it's signed. And how do you trust? How do you put so much effort into a deal you can't trust?
Yeah.
What's the purpose of it all?
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. But thanks to you all. This special holiday edition of the Power Panel, Melanie Richer, Greg McEachern, Fred Delory, and Robert Fife.